Hey there, fellow gardeners. Welcome back to the Soil House. Today I'm pulling back the curtain on something that's been quietly revolutionizing gardens for over 2 centuries, yet most modern gardeners have never heard of it. I'm talking about biochar. And trust me when I say this ancient soil amendment makes regular compost look like child's play. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another gardening fad, let me be clear. This isn't some newfangled invention cooked up by soil scientists in lab coats. Our ancestors were using this stuff in the 1800s and earlier, creating soil so fertile it's still productive today. The crazy part? In many places, making biochar the traditional way became restricted or outright banned due to fire regulations and air quality concerns. But the science behind why it works is absolutely fascinating, and there are perfectly legal ways to harness its power in your own garden. Picture this. You're a farmer in the 1800s, clearing land and dealing with endless piles of wood waste. Instead of just burning it all to ash, you'd practice a controlled, smoldering process, creating charcoal that you'd then incorporate into your fields. This wasn't just waste management. It was soil engineering at its finest. What these old-timers discovered through trial and error is something that modern science has now confirmed with microscopes and lab testing. When organic material undergoes pyrolysis, which is basically heating in the absence of oxygen, it transforms into a carbon-rich structure that's absolutely riddled with microscopic pores. We're talking about a single gram of biochar having the surface area of a football field. Let that sink in for a moment. This porous structure does something that regular compost simply cannot match. It becomes a permanent home for beneficial microbes, a reservoir for nutrients, and a water retention system that can survive in your soil for hundreds, even thousands of years. Meanwhile, your beautiful compost pile? It's fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it breaks down and needs constant replenishing. I love compost as much as the next gardener. I've got 3 bins going in my backyard right now, and I get genuinely excited when I turn them and see that rich, dark, crumbly texture developing. But here's the uncomfortable truth we need to face. Compost is temporary. When you add compost to your soil, you're feeding your garden a nutritious meal. The microbes go to town on it, breaking it down and releasing nutrients for your plants. This is wonderful for immediate plant health, but within a single growing season, much of that organic matter has been consumed and converted into carbon dioxide that simply floats away into the atmosphere. You're basically on a compost treadmill, constantly needing to add more to maintain soil quality. Biochar operates on an entirely different timescale. When you incorporate biochar into your soil, you're making a structural change that persists. Studies have found biochar in archaeological sites that's still biologically active after more than 2,000 years. In the Amazon rainforest, researchers discovered areas of incredibly fertile dark soil called terra preta that indigenous people created centuries ago using biochar techniques. That soil is still outproducing the surrounding jungle floor today. The difference comes down to chemistry. Compost is full of simple and complex organic compounds that microbes can metabolize relatively quickly. But biochar's carbon structure is so stable that microbes can't break it down easily. Instead, they colonize its surfaces, living in those countless microscopic pores I mentioned earlier. You're not just feeding your soil, you're building it an apartment complex that never deteriorates. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening in your soil when you add biochar, because this is where it gets really exciting. First, there's the water retention factor. Each particle of biochar acts like a tiny sponge, absorbing water and dissolved nutrients during irrigation or rainfall, then slowly releasing them as your plants need them. In my own trials at the Soil House, I've seen biochar amended beds require watering about 30% less frequently than control beds with the same plants. That's not just convenient. In areas facing water restrictions or drought conditions, it's potentially game-changing. Second, there's the nutrient exchange capacity. Biochar has both a high surface area and a negative electrical charge. Without getting too deep into chemistry class, this means it attracts and holds onto positively charged nutrients like calcium, magnesium, and potassium. These nutrients don't wash away with the next rain like they might in regular soil. Instead, they stick around on the biochar surfaces until plant roots come calling and exchange them for hydrogen ions. It's like having a nutrient bank account in your soil rather than cash that keeps blowing away in the wind. Third, and this is where biochar really shines compared to compost, is the microbial habitat it creates. Those pores I keep mentioning aren't just storing water and nutrients. They're actually creating protected environments where beneficial bacteria and fungi can thrive away from predators and harsh conditions. Research has shown that biochar-amended soils can support microbial populations that are, well, orders of magnitude higher than unamended soils. More beneficial microbes mean better nutrient cycling, improved disease suppression, and, honestly, healthier plant growth all around. Now, here's where we need to have an honest conversation. The traditional method of making biochar involves burning biomass in pits or piles, which creates smoke and can violate local air quality regulations. This is, frankly, why it's banned in many areas. You absolutely need to check your local laws before attempting any burning. However, there are completely legal alternatives that let you harness biochar's benefits without running afoul of regulations. You can purchase biochar from garden suppliers, which is often made in industrial facilities with proper emission controls. Yes, it costs more upfront than compost, but remember, you're making a one-time investment rather than an ongoing expense. If you want to make your own, look into cone kilns or retort-style biochar makers that are designed for backyard use and produce minimal smoke. These devices create the oxygen-limited environment needed for proper biochar formation while keeping emissions low enough to comply with most local regulations. I've been using a simple cone kiln setup at the soil house, and, honestly, it works beautifully. When you're ready to apply biochar to your garden, here's the crucial step most people miss. Don't just dig it straight into your soil. Raw biochar is like an empty hotel. It's got all these pores and surfaces, but they're not yet colonized by microbes or loaded with nutrients. If you add it directly to your beds, it'll actually compete with your plants for nitrogen initially as it begins to charge up. Instead, charge your biochar first. Mix it with compost, worm castings, or even let it soak in a nutrient-rich solution like compost tea for a few weeks before application. This preloads it with microbes and nutrients so it starts benefiting your plants immediately, rather than causing a temporary nutrient depression. I typically mix biochar with finished compost at about a 1-to-1 ratio and let it sit for a month before using it. Application rates don't need to be heavy. Even adding biochar at just 5 to 10% of your soil volume by weight can produce noticeable results. In my vegetable beds, I've had excellent success working about half an inch of charged biochar into the top 6 inches of soil. The effects are cumulative too. Unlike compost that needs constant replenishment, once biochar is in your soil, it's there for the long haul, getting more effective as it ages and colonizes. I'm not one for making wild claims, so let me share some actual observations from my trials here at the soil house. In side-by-side comparisons of identical tomato varieties, the biochar amended beds consistently produced about 20 to 30% more fruit by weight. The plants showed better drought tolerance, recovered faster from heat stress, and had noticeably more vigorous root systems when I pulled them at season's end. In my heavy clay soil area, biochar has been transformative. Clay soils tend to compact easily and drain poorly, but after incorporating biochar 2 seasons ago, the structure has improved dramatically. Water infiltration is faster, and the soil stays workable even after heavy rains. The biochar particles physically separate the clay platelets, creating air spaces and drainage channels that persist season after season. Perhaps most impressively, I've noticed a significant reduction in fertilizer needs. My biochar beds now get about half the supplemental feeding compared to my traditional beds, yet they're outperforming them. That's the nutrient retention at work, keeping fertility in place rather than letting it leach away. The beauty of biochar is its versatility. Whether you're growing in raised beds, containers, or in-ground gardens, you can incorporate it into your system. For container gardening, mixing biochar into your potting soil at about 10 to 15% by volume creates a growing medium that needs less frequent watering and fertilizing. You know, I've kept perennial herbs thriving in the same biochar amended containers for 3 years now, without ever needing to replace the soil. It's really something to see just how well they do over time. For established gardens, you can top dress with a biochar and compost mixture, just letting worms and natural soil processes gradually incorporate it deeper. It's a simple method, but honestly, it works wonders. For new beds, mixing it thoroughly into your initial soil preparation sets you up for years of improved performance. It's a bit of extra work up front, but trust me, the payoff is well worth it. The key is thinking of biochar as infrastructure, not fertilizer. You're building your soil's capacity to hold water, retain nutrients, and support microbial life. The plants you're growing this season will benefit, but so will every generation of plants that follows. Look, I get it. Biochar requires a bit more upfront effort and investment than just tossing compost on your beds. But if you're serious about building truly sustainable, high-performance soil that gets better with age rather than requiring constant inputs, biochar is the missing piece you've been looking for. You know, our gardening ancestors stumbled onto something truly profound with their charcoal-making techniques. Modern science has simply confirmed what they learned through, well, observation and experience. By combining biochar with good composting practices and sound gardening techniques, you're not just growing plants. You're building soil that could outlive you, creating fertility that, honestly, future gardeners will benefit from decades or even centuries down the road. If this approach resonates with you and you want to see more in-depth content about building incredible soil, make sure you subscribe to the Soil House. Go ahead and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos on advanced biochar techniques, soil testing, and season-by-season soil building strategies. And if you found this valuable, share it with your gardening friends. The more of us focusing on genuine soil health rather than quick fixes, the better our collective gardens will be. Now get out there and start building some soil that'll make your great-grandchildren's gardens thrive. Happy gardening, and I'll see you in the next one.